Good afternoon. I'm going to call the Finance Committee to order. David, are there any public speakers?
Mr. Chairman, we have 5 public speakers this morning. The first speaker is Murray Bowden, who'll be followed by Jason Pinero.
5 speakers.
I don't know how much you've noticed that the MTA has changed in the last short period of time. I'd like to point out a couple of things. This is a loop, first time today that I've had it, goes around my neck, and so I can hear what you're saying through my hearing aids. That's brand new. It's one of the changes that's happening around here. Another change that I'll bet none of you noticed, when the consultant did the report on the Canarsie Tunnel, on the top where it had the title was on the left side, not in the center. That's a first. They understand that when you put the title on the left, you can put the speaker's picture on the right all the time. What is that indicative of? It's indicative of the fact that there are people here who understand the change. Your direction this morning about speaking concisely and not reading what was in the book, it's correct. I read the book beforehand. Saturday afternoon, I printed it out and I read the essential parts so I could speak here correctly. You don't have to repeat what's in the book, but this is changing. And when they changed the tunnel and went to a no shutdown, it set the tone for the rest of the country. Easy Pass is done by plate number. What the Thruway just did with $350 million on reading, putting up gantries, you can do something about it. I can't. It's a waste. I want to thank all of the people at the MTA who over the years have guided me, mentored me, and taught me. I appreciate it, and I could not have done without the help of many, many people here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Pinero, followed by Lisa Daglian.
Well, hi, Larry Schwartz. On the Monday afternoon after my birthday. It's 1:23 in the afternoon, and someone said that we're in morning. That's an epic fail. But first things first, we learned this morning that the Metropolitan Transportation Authority is losing $260 million in concept of fare evasion. That's a bad news for us, that we pay our fair share in transit. But those who take the bus in Staten Island, they do a free fall when I get out from work 4 times a week. And it could be worse if we take commuter rails like Metro North and Long Island Railroad. So, Bob, I want you to be honest with all of us. What you guys are going to do with that amount of money that we are losing as we speak. And as we speak, there could be people not paying their fare in the buses. There could be people hopping in the turnstiles in every single subway station in the city. But where are we going to get the money? Another fare increase in 2 more years? We don't need another fare increase, Bob. We have to look for the money, and everybody has to pay their fair share like I do every single day. And with this, I yield my rest of the time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian, followed by Finley Staub.
good morning. Lisa Daglian. I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. I'm here today to talk about transparency and public involvement, specifically about the debarment rules, which were signed off on during executive session of the May 22nd board meeting. We, on May 30th, wrote a letter regarding those. We're not sure why the announcement was made during an executive session. Nothing we've seen would indicate a reason why it couldn't have been taken during the course of a regular meeting. We're concerned that signing off on this important regulation without public announcement or discussion sends a message that significant board business is occurring behind closed doors. We were glad to see that the rules were included in the June 5th State Register with public comment period, which was open for 60 days. We think that goes till about August 4th. And we'd like to think that that is a direct result of our letter, but I do not know. So other than the register and the two items that appeared in the Politico Pro, we haven't seen any notice to the general public, or actually, from what we understand, nor has the contracting community. So as the MTA's legislatively created rider advocacy organization, we strongly agree that there is a need to rein in construction costs, overruns, and delays, and that scarce public funds have been spent on this for too long. We're glad to see that the governor and the legislature included reforms, including the framework for the debarment provisions in the budget bill. However, we do not know what the effect will be on ongoing and new construction, including projects such as East Side Access, PTC, CBTC, new rail and subway card purchases, et cetera, particularly the companies that were referenced this morning as having been very close to certainly over their time limit, as am I. So we do look forward to a response to our letter and some daylight on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Finley Staub, to be followed by Bradley Brashears.
Hi, good morning. My name is Finley Staub, and I am a student at a school for students who have learning disabilities in Brooklyn Heights. Today I'm here to discuss about Omni's progress, and as well as student MetroCards going along with Omni. Recently, in recent reports, from what I've seen, Omni seems to be going extremely well on the Lexington Avenue line. I'm really happy that it really is going extremely well. And another part I wanted to discuss is student MetroCards and how that will conflict with Omni. So with student MetroCards, with the MetroCards being taken out of commission in a couple of years' time, and in place with Omni, which is contactless payment cards set like in England, in London. I'm wondering how student MetroCards will be affected by this, because in a few years' time I'm going to be a CUNY student. And I'm really hoping to discuss that with someone, if available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the final speaker.
Thank you, David. Next, I'd like to have approval of the May 20th minutes. Do I have a motion? Second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion. Can we make sure that Commissioner Feinberg's name is corrected in the minutes? Thank you.
Thank you to others who noticed that when I did not.
That's why we have
Clearly,
Dr.
need to get a little
Metzger.
more sleep. Thank you,
Yep.
Dr. Metzger.
Fine. David, can you take us through the work plan, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There are no changes to the work plan, and the next item is Budget Watch. Budget Watch focuses on May preliminary operating results and subsidy cash results through June, and are measured against the adopted budget. Passenger revenues are favorable in May by $8.4 million. Subway was $7.8 million favorable, while combined bus for New York City Transit and MTA bus were $0.4 million unfavorable. Long Island Railroad was 1.4 million favorable on higher non-commutation ridership, including the PGA tournament, while Metro North was about $500,000 unfavorable due to slightly lower commutation ridership. Year-to-date, passenger revenues were $11.3 million favorable. Toll revenue was $6 million favorable and was $17.2 million favorable year-to-date. Preliminary expenses for May were $1.9 million unfavorable, reflecting higher overtime in New York City Transit and MTA Bus, which were mostly offset by vacancy savings, lower energy and health and welfare costs, and controls on non-labor spending. Year-to-date expenses were $124.1 million favorable, reflecting vacancy and non-labor savings, particularly offset by higher overtime and paratransit service costs. Preliminary expenses also reflect overtime, which was $17.2 million unfavorable in May and $70.5 million unfavorable year-to-date, mostly in New York City Transit and due to the subway action plan related work, along with vacancy absentee coverage and overruns due to service delays. While programmatic information on overspending for May is currently unavailable, more detailed information through April is provided in an overtime details section on the 4th page of Budget Watch. Debt service for May was $112.7 million favorable, the reversal of pre-funding May debt service in April, and was $55.6 million favorable year-to-date, reflecting favorable timing and lower variable rates. Total subsidies in June were $51.6 million unfavorable. The payroll mobility tax was $11 million unfavorable, and MTA aid was $58.1 million unfavorable, both due to delays in the transmittal of receipts. MRT receipts were also unfavorable by $4.9 million. Favorable results were reported for MMTOA, the petroleum business tax, the for-hire vehicle surcharge, and the urban tax, which combined were $21.8 million favorable for June. Year-to-date, subsidies were $20.2 million unfavorable, the result of PMT and MTA aid timing delays. Excluding those timing delays, subsidies would be about $48 million favorable, primarily on the strength of urban tax and the petroleum business tax, which were $52 million and $16 million favorable year-to-date, respectively. Overall, year-to-date results were favorable by $188 million due to lower operating expenses and strong January and February urban tax collections. Adjusting for the impact of the PMT and MTA delays, year-to-date results would be about $250 million favorable. And if there are any questions?
Commissioner?
Thank you, sir. One of the issues I think a lot about related to this organization and its existential survival is the $1 billion shortfall that Bob is talking about in 2022. And there's things we control and there's things we can't control about that. One of the things we can't control is the real estate environment. The MRT is starting to concern me. We've talked a bit about this at times, and we obviously have no control over the real estate economy, but we are obviously a beneficiary or someone who will suffer as a result of its performance. Can you give us some sense with your crystal ball about where it's going? Because the MRT numbers are concerning to me on a year-to-date basis, and you hear questions about the health of the mortgage world these days. Obviously, rates going down should be beneficial to us, but what's the view on the real estate market?
Well, the first thing I'd point out is there are 3 different mortgage recording taxes in the real estate taxes. In the urban tax, which is only commercial properties in New York City, valued at over $500 million, that's doing okay. On the what we call the MRT, there's an MRT1 and an MRT2. MRT2 is residential properties only, and that's been the one that's been on the weak side. It's about $4.2 million unfavorable for the year-to-date through June. MRT1, which is all mortgages, is actually favorable by $2.9 million. So it probably has something to do with the economy slacking off a little bit. It has a lot to do with the change in the tax laws, and we update our tax receipt forecast every financial plan, and we're in the process of doing that for the July plan. It's going to be in the same basic ballpark we are now. We get forecasts for the residential section from IHS Global, and we use those numbers to do our forecasts.
Any other questions? Okay. David?
Next, we have Finance Watch, which can be found in Section 4 on page 24, and Pat McCoy will take us through it.
Good afternoon. We just have 5 transactions. I'll just quickly summarize for your benefit here that are in Finance Watch. The first is that on May 14th, we competitively bid $177 million of Transportation Revenue Bonds 2019B. This was won by Bank of America Merrill Lynch through a competitive bid at an all-in true interest cost of 3.82%. Next, on May 22nd, we issued $1.2 billion of Transportation Revenue Bond Anticipation Notes through competitive offering. These notes were won by 8 different firms, and they're listed there in your Finance Watch. Next, on May 23rd, we issued $150 million of TBTA bonds for new money, existing new money projects. This was a unique transaction because it was an all minority and women business enterprise owned firm deal, as well as our service disabled veteran owned firms. And the books were handled by Williams Capital Group together with PNC, the joint venture. And that was an all-in TIC of 3.7%. Another notable transaction occurred on June 3rd. This was the remarketing of Transportation Revenue Bonds 2012A-2. A $50 million transaction, not a large transaction, but we remarketed it with a letter of credit from the Bank of Montreal, and we put it on an electronic trading platform called Clarity. This was a first time for us to put a transaction on this platform. We're going to watch and see how it does. This is a new way to remarket variable rate demand bonds. Provides a lot more transparency in how the price is determined on a weekly basis for these bonds. So we'll continue to update Finance Watch with this and all of our data on our variable rate deals, but we're very excited to be trying this out. Lastly, we have the fuel hedge, which was bid on May 28th. This was won by Goldman Sachs J. Aaron. This was a 2.8 million gallon ULSD trade at $1.96 per gallon. That completes Finance Watch, unless there's any questions.
It's all right. Yeah, this is my. Bob knows I'm going to ask this question. With the new congestion pricing support the legislature gave us, are our projections still holding firm in terms of the percentage of debt we're going to be hit with? We were marching towards 20%. I think we're 18 something now.
Yes.
Does it change that in any way?
When we get to that, that'll be 2021, our revenues will be higher as well. So I think we'll still be in that same range. I don't think we're going to go beyond the 20%.
Beyond the 20%?
Yeah. That's 20% of our total operating revenues.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Paid to debt service. That's, I've been concerned, but that's okay. Thank you.
Next, we move on to MTHQ and all agency items. There are 6 action items. Pat McCoy is here to take questions on the first 3 items. The first is the authorization to increase existing new money transit and commuter project bond authorization.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just stop right here, Pat.
Okay.
Because I want to take a few minutes to brief members of the committee and make sure they have some information that I've been able to pull together with the help of Bob and Doug Spiro. So, and please, anything I say wrong or incorrect, please jump right in there and correct me. So, when Sarah put together her recommendations on reforms so this board can be more efficient and effective, a couple of the items were not only to make sure that we got all the agenda items earlier on so we had a chance to review them, but also put it in a simpler format, but to give the chairs of the agencies more say and control over what actually gets on the agenda. And one of the things I've been doing for the last 3-4 months with Bob is sitting with him or talking to him on the phone weeks in advance of the Finance Committee meeting to go through what he thinks he needs on the agenda for us to pass. So one of the items that he brought to my attention was the need to increase our bond authorization for existing projects in our capital program from what we've already authorized is $3 billion and increase it another $2 billion to be able to make sure that we have cash to pay for ongoing projects. As a result of him bringing that to my attention, that sent a light off in my head, which I then asked him a whole litany of questions, and I appreciate his patience for all the questions I asked. So here is a few things I want to make sure the Finance Committee is aware of, and here are also a couple of suggestions and recommendations I would like to make before we actually take a vote on this item, because I support the item, but I support the item with caveats, okay? So one is, I want you to know that this additional bond authorization is for programs both in the still 2010 through 2014 capital program, as well as the 2015 through 2019 program. I want you to be aware, one of the things I asked is a status of both programs, just as an FYI to the members of the Finance Committee, and I'm happy to provide this information to people that don't sit on this committee, that there are still in the 2010 through 2014 capital program, 29 projects in design, 161 projects in construction, 792 completed projects, that's just under 80% of the projects in that program, and 21 we put in is called future, which means they haven't got off the drawing board. In the 2015 through 2019 program, there are 230 projects in design, 433 projects under construction, 225 completed projects, and future 237. I asked first, what is the status of all these projects that are in design? Do they come under the statute, which is design build? Do they not come under the statute? What are they? A number of those projects do come under the design build statute. Some they haven't determined because they haven't figured out what the cost of the project is yet. And some projects they've gotten a waiver on. I think 34 out of 36 they asked a waiver on design build. But it's a moving target. I also have data, and I'm happy to share it, on what projects are on budget and on time, but I'm not going to waste the committee's time right this second just to kind of keep things moving. And of course, I ask questions regarding the projects on the future, which is 237 projects, which would mean they haven't even begun. Now, we're at the tail end of our 5-year capital program, and as we all know, we were in our board briefings, we were told that we're going to receive the next 5-year capital program in September. So one of the things I've already suggested is that all projects that are in the future category that be put on hold so that we can review all these projects. One, to ask the question why they haven't moved further along. Two, whether or not any of these projects should just be rolled over into the next 5-year capital program. So there's a lot of questions in terms of what these individual projects are, why they haven't gone to the design of the construction phase, whether or not we should be eliminating these programs based on need, as well as there's more questions to be asked about those projects that are sort of like in the design phase. One of our newer members that's not here today is Robert Mahika, who's the budget director for the Division of Budget. And one of the things that I would like to do as chair of the Finance Committee and on behalf of the Finance Committee is go through all this information that Bob has been able to get me and provide to me so that I can have also him and his staff take a look at these projects, since we rely on state funding for our capital programs in big ways, as well as federal funding, and try to, just double check all the facts and figures and make sure that we're all on the same page. So and I'll try to answer any questions, but I'm trying also not to, do a brain freeze data dump here. But one of the so when I go to the caveats is one of the things, Bob, that I would like to get your commitment on is if the finance committee and the board approves the additional $2 billion in authorization, right? Because I don't think any board member is looking to take a project that's currently in construction and have it come to a stop because there's no cash to pay the contractors or the bills. But one is, before you go to the market to borrow any money, you're going to let us know how much money you're going to go into the market to borrow and when you're going to do it, for what projects the borrowing is for, okay? So we know what the money's going to be used for, which projects, and if we have any questions regarding those projects and whether or not they're on time and on budget, and if they're not on time or on budget, why aren't they, and what are we going to do to fix that? The committee has the opportunity in advance to be able to do their own fiduciary due diligence and to ask whatever questions and feel comfortable, getting them comfortable with whatever answers. But when we're talking about authorizing an additional $2 billion, I think we need to be diligent in making sure that we know how that money is going out the door and being spent. So,
Commissioner, if I could, I just wanted to react to that most recent statement. When we get into the market to borrow money for existing approved capital projects, whether they're in the 10 to 14 or the 15 to 19 program, we don't have really good, strong visibility as to what invoices are going to be coming down the pike. Our job at this point is to make sure that we have money available to pay the invoices when they come in. That's part of the reason we've gone to the process of issuing bond anticipation notes in advance of issuing long-term bonds for projects. So we'll issue the notes for 1, 2, or 3 years for an interim short-term period. We'll spend those notes down on existing approved projects, and then we'll have a really complete, clear, clean list of all the invoices that were funded from potentially hundreds of different capital projects across our system. The capital program has such breadth and depth that that process gives us really good visibility when we long-term finance the notes and take them out.
Reiterate, if we could have your authorization, the committee's authorization, to sell the notes so that we can make our cash flow requirements as they come in, then as Pat said, we'll know exactly what we spent the money on. Before we sell long-term bonds, we always have to know what projects the monies were spent on, and we can give you a list of here's what we spent it on. But the whole purpose of this is just trying so that we don't have to delay potentially a sale each time. So again, if we could do the notes to pay the cash expenditures, keep track of exactly what it is, and come back and give you a report on the projects that were actually funded with takeout bonds, that would be very helpful.
I know, Commissioner Vanderpool, just one other thing. My issue, though, is as chair of the Finance Committee, as a member of the board, I'm not going to speak for any other member of the committee or the board, I want to know everything before the fact, not after the fact, okay? I don't want to know what you spent it on. I want to know what you need to spend it on, what the request is to spend it on. So I'm looking for the information in advance. So it's not about whether or not you have the authorization to borrow the money. I want to know what the money is going to be spent on before you spend it, okay? And if the different divisions need to be able to need to provide you additional information so that you can help provide that, right? Then it'll be incumbent on them to do that, right? But I want to, spending billions of dollars of money, of public taxpayer money, I just think that this finance committee needs to be more informed and better aware of the status of projects and what monies are being spent on. Commissioner Vanderpool.
Thank you. I have reservations about increasing this amount, and it's because we still have an outstanding $7.3 billion commitment from New York State and a level of commitment from New York City for our existing 1519 capital program that has not yet been fully executed. And we've heard over the past 18 months in particular that that money has not been released because, it would be released once the MTA has exhausted all of its resources. It seems to me that we are at that point, have been at that point where we have exhausted our fiscal resources. That is, to my understanding, what this request is to increase an additional $2 billion to provide the, as I've heard both the chair and yourself say, to make sure we have the money to pay our contractors. So I'm confused as to why that money from the state has not yet been released if we are at this point, seemingly where we've exhausted our resources.
The incremental bonding that we're asking for is just for this year, meaning it's still within the limits that we said that the MTA would fund. And so we have the capacity to borrow that money. We just don't have authorization this year to borrow it because those who've been on the board for more than 1 year know that this is kind of what we do every year at the beginning. At the very end of a year, we ask the board for authorization so that we can go into the market as needed to fund projects. Otherwise, we're going to come to you every month and say, can we get authorization again, which is kind of needless. So we're not going beyond what we said we were going to sell, for the capital program. The projects are all within the approved capital program, so that's what we're doing. If we all recall, the business deal we had with the state and with the city was we would spend our money first, and after we spent our money, they would come in. I have to say right now, we are already starting to commit against the state money, the 7.3. We're committing against about $2 billion of that, and we're starting to see some expenditures. It's kind of slow how the cash flow comes in. We make commitments, but the projects come in slow, build up, and then tail off. So the state has already allowed us to start committing against their money, and I think we're close to going to $3 billion, are we not, Pat?
We're over $3 billion, yes.
We're over $3 billion. So we are committing against the state money, we'll commit against the city money. So I think we're operating the way we agreed to operate with the state and with the city.
But we're not spending our money. We're spending borrowed money. And just because we have this capacity to continue to borrow doesn't necessarily mean that we should. My credit card limit is very, very high, but that doesn't mean I necessarily want to meet that limit. My concern stems from, and it's everyone's concern here, I'm not unique, is our growing debt service and our $41 billion in debt. And it's not clear to me what our plan is to whittle down that $41 billion in debt over time. We are servicing this every year, but it's not clear to me what our plan is to reel this in. If I had $41 billion in debt as an individual, my financial advisor would put me on a very stringent plan. So, right. I'll pause there.
Yeah, Commissioner, let me just say again, we are not bonding, we're not talking about bonding any more than what the board approved in the 10 to 14 capital program and in the 15 to 19 capital program. We're not exceeding that. We're staying within it. It's just a question of when do we have to issue that debt. And you never know because it's always the cash flows coming in. And what we've seen is, as you all know, we're accelerating projects. We're trying to get more projects done sooner. And that's just causing us to have to fund earlier than we thought we were going to. So that's what this purpose is just to meet the remaining expected cash flow requirements for the year.
Commissioner Albert?
Bob, do you have any idea what percentage of our debt and our debt service and all of that is due to the lack of timely receipt of our capital program money from the state?
The capital funds are coming from the state as we expected them. Remember, there were two pieces. There was the $1 billion that was original. I think the city had $661 million in it originally, and then the state and the city agreed to give us the incremental, the additional funds, roughly $1.8 billion from the city and $7.3 billion from the state.
But there's still money we're anticipating from the 2010 to 2014 capital program.
And we are discussing that with them, and we have a memorandum of understanding on receiving that funds. So.
If we're having a discussion, I think we're mixing at least three different topics here together, and it's getting a bit of a soup, and I'm going to just spend a little consulting effort to separate these topics.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the first topic we're talking about is is Larry's issue, which is laudable, which is what's the money being used for? Now, what I heard you say, Bob, is your bond anticipation notes. Most people may not know a note is a short-term duration, 1 to 3 years? So short-term to provide the cash, and our bonds are normally decades long. So we're talking about notes that are meant to fund in the interim in anticipation of then bonds, which are 10, 20, 30-year duration. So that's one topic which is interesting. And I personally agree with Larry's notion of understanding what the bonds are used for, but I would give you flexibility, of course, Bob, to issue notes in advance of that because you need the cash. So that's one topic. The second topic we started talking about, which is the notion of what's our debt capacity, which is a whole other topic. And in some ways, as David has brought up, when I think about that, it's almost one of those, you know when you see it issue. When you can't get a AA rating anymore, or you can't sell your bonds in the market, that's where the problem is. We don't know where. It's like, where's Mach 1? What's pornography? It's like, I don't know. But that one we only, unfortunately, can really know when it happens, and thank God it hasn't happened yet, but it may happen at some point. Is 40 the miraculous number? I don't know. Is it 50? I don't know. The third part is about what can we live within and what's our means, and that's a whole other topic, which I feel is not just a capital topic, but that's an operating topic as well. And that's at least three topics, if not the fourth, which is what's our cash flow usage. But we conflate them, and I want to separate them, and I don't know if we want to have separate discussions of each of those, but each one is an important topic. Some is about fiduciary responsibility towards where's the money going, some is about existential and what can we handle.
If I could, I would just like to address a couple things that we heard. On the state issue, the $1.2 billion note that I talked about in Finance Watch, that was broken into two components, and I explained this in my email when I sent it out. The first component is $200 million, which will be used for those state projects. That note comes due May 15th next year, and we've already alerted the state to the fact that when that note comes due, we're going to have to take that out, and we're going to be looking for their support to start coming in to help pay the debt service on that. So one, that's been communicated very clearly to the state. And to the degree that we continue to spend on those state projects, we'll come back and issue more notes. And so that when those notes again have to be paid off with a long-term bond issue, we'll be able to show the state exactly what was spent, how the money was spent, and we'll work with them on the structure and whatever else, what other input they want into the transaction. But as to visibility on those projects that will be paid off with the notes, the one thing I can tell you, and we have agency representatives here, is that it's very difficult for the agencies to have visibility on what invoices are going to hit the system next week, next month, and so forth. And again, that is why we've issued the ban process to enable us to have visibility on that when we long-term finance the projects. The fact is the board has already approved every single project that's in that hopper. We just don't know the timing on when those bills will come due. So, I mean, I don't mean to be flippant, but one of the things to look at is to look at the 10 to 14 capital program and the 15 to 19 capital program. And in the back, those blue sheets list every single project. We just completed an exercise for the New York State Senate Committee on Investigations. And between the period of 2016 to June of this year, we showed them all the spending that we've provided. We gave them a spreadsheet of over 65,000 rows of invoices. So I would just warn the board, there is a lot of data, there's a lot of information there. And we've tried to slice and dice that and present it in the most digestible format possible, which we can provide to the board here. But I'm hard pressed to say that I can tell you exactly how we're going to spend the next band proceeds, because I just don't.
I hear what you're saying, but too often, having sat on this board now for like 4 years, I hear too often what we can't do versus what we can do. So I'm having a difficult time with this. Look, one is I want a commitment that every project that's in the category of future, everything is going to be frozen until there's further discussions about what those projects are and whether or not they need or should continue to go forward under the existing programs, or they should somehow be included in the next 5-year capital program. Two is, at a minimum, see, I'm willing to compromise if possible. At a minimum, the projects that are currently under construction in either capital program that are not on time and not on budget, I don't want another dime, penny, nickel, dollar to be spent on those projects until we have answers as to why they're not on time and they're not on budget and how you're going to get them on time and on budget. So I'll give the committee an example. Of the 2015 through 2019 program, which is more relevant here because obviously from the 2010 through 2014, if it's not done yet, it's late. There are 90% of the projects that are currently under construction are on budget. So I'm told. But only 69% are on time. So my concern is, all right, 31% are not on time. Does that mean we're going to have cost overruns because they're going to be late? So at a minimum, I understand what you're saying, that you may not be able to tell us every item and every invoice, and we don't want to get buried in paper. I don't think that's our role and a responsibility. But at a minimum, before any additional money is paid out to those projects that are not on time and not on budget, that we're going to have a conversation as to why that is and what the remedy is going to be. Do I have that assurance on both projects that are in the future category and the projects that are in the not on time, not on budget? Clearly, I'll have a conversation with the chairman as well, but I want it on the record here that we're not going to, we have a commitment that we're not going to learn about these things after the fact. We're going to know about them in advance.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I can commit on behalf of the capital construction people at each of the agencies or the people at BSC. I can commit to you that we're ready to sit down with you and go through the status where we are now and see if we can work something out. Because again, we recognize your concern. We do recognize the concern. But what I'd like to do is try to address those issues up front and see if truly is, over budget, behind schedule, can we determine mitigation efforts now and somehow address them. But I'm not sure we can commit on behalf of all the parties involved in the capital program, commitment, construction, and accounts payable to be able to do that, excuse me, and still be able to hit, our timely payment requirements. Because by law, as you know, we have to pay on time.
When are you looking to sell these notes?
We don't have a schedule at the moment. We want the authorization so that when proceeds balances drop down, that we'll go out and issue the notes.
So why can't you make the commitment that before you're going to go out there and sell the notes, you're going to be able to provide me/this committee with the information I just requested at a minimum on the projects that are not on time and on budget?
That's what, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's what I was suggesting, that we would take the time now and try to address the concerns. if this is going to be a rolling commitment, this is going to be very difficult. So that's what I'm saying.
In many ways, the questions that you want answered, Mr. Chairman, are best addressed at the Capital Program Oversight Committee, which does get into, with each agency represented, granular detail on particularly important projects, but quite frankly, any project that the board wants to know about. At the finance level, what we're doing is making sure that we honor our prompt payment requirements that are embodied in state law, and that we fulfill existing approved agreements that the board has already authorized. When it comes to managing the projects, the finance department just does not have the mandate or the resources to track down the information you're asking for. We would work closely with the agencies to provide what we could, but I couldn't represent that we have that kind of visibility.
Commissioner Feinberg, you?
Well, so this is why this is messy. You do have the mandate because the Finance Committee Chairman is mandating it. So you do have the mandate. You may not have the resources, which we have to address, but you do have the mandate. Here's the problem. This board is consistently criticized for not acting like a real board. I'm like a broken record on this. How often do I say, if we were a real board, we would do X, Y, Z? And some people say, yeah, we should do that. And other people say, but we're not a real board. And I go, no, then we need to act like a real board and be a real board. And so what Chairman Schwartz is asking for is totally responsible and reasonable from the perspective of a board. And we need to work out a schedule, figure out a way for you all to be able to come back and tell the Finance Committee what you need, what you're supposed to be, what you are asking for permission to do. But I don't think anyone should expect this board to continue to be criticized for not behaving like a real board, and then have the MTA team come to us and ask us to take additional steps where we are not behaving like a real board. I think the board as a whole is trying to do more to exert oversight and take responsibility for as much as we can. And so it's on us to help get you the resources that you need to be able to report back to us. But it doesn't seem too much to ask to have the team be able to come back and report to the committee.
Commissioner?
Let me add one point here. We are generally keeping our sources of cash and our uses of cash very separate. So you guys are trying to generate the sources of cash, and it seems like it's happening untethered to the uses of cash. What Larry's trying to do is say, if the uses are not appropriate, I'm not going to create the sources. And so typically your job is to generate sources of cash, keep them ready to go, and once the check comes due, we have the money to clear it. And Larry's trying to put a stop payment on the check effectively before you start generating the sources of cash. I think there's an interesting question about how we can actually generate from the operating agencies and capital construction a clarity about whether it's actually the right time to, in fact, issue a check, meaning of certain milestones and such, and then saying to you, okay, now guys, go get us the sources, as opposed to what we do now, which is the two happen independently.
Look, we spend the whole day here now, and I'm not trying to make the day even longer than it already has become on Mondays when we have committee meetings. What is frustrating for me is I think MTA leadership understands what I'm trying to say and what other board members are trying to say, but I'm not getting the answers that I want to hear. We have a fiduciary responsibility, just like I know you have you take it seriously, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to be accountable for all public dollars that are spent at this agency. If it wasn't for the fact that, I've insisted as chair of the Finance Committee that Bob sit with me and get the agenda to me at least 2 weeks in advance of a meeting so I can go over it, I never would have had the opportunity to ask all the questions I did and get all this information, and to realize that there's like 250 something projects over a 10-year span that hasn't ever left the drawing board, which leads to all kinds of questions why that happened. And I want to see this board to be, as Commissioner Feinberg said, a lot more accountable. I'm tired of watching the board be criticized for not being assertive enough, aggressive enough, and not kind of driving the policy agenda here going forward. And so this has raised a number of questions for me, questions that I just learned recently, so I don't want anyone to think I've been sitting on this thing for a week or 10 days. I have not. But I'm trying to be practical, responsible, and reasonable. I am not looking to stop a project in the middle of construction. I know how important operation and maintenance is from a construction side. If it wasn't for the fact that the governor pushed the subway action plan, this agency would be in a lot more trouble because of his initiative and the $800 million that the city and the state finally agreed to put together. That's when you read about these improved performances, trains running better on time, other good things happening. But I think we have a responsibility to understand before you spend the money or give the agencies or the divisions the money, especially for those projects that are not on time and on budget, which has been an historic problem of this agency. That's why we're in a design build kind of environment, that we be able to get that information. So do I have a commitment or don't I have a commitment that before you're going to go out there and borrow money, public money, that we're going to have to pay back, that we're going to have a conversation about trying to provide the answers to those questions? Commissioner?
Can I just add before, I'm assuming we have a list somewhere. We have a sense of what we want to do, right? I mean, I'm having trouble trying to understand
That's
why.
the capital program I mentioned. So
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. So, and we're one step and there's the second step. But at some point, you guys have to look at the list, right? You can't just say, I want to go out and market this or, right? I mean, am I missing something here?
We finance the bond finance portion
For
of
the
the
capital
capital
plan,
program
right.
on what's called a pool basis. What that means is there are literally hundreds of projects out there all across our network that are cash flowing. I can't tell you what's going to show up in the invoice pool today or tomorrow or next week. But those projects have been approved by this board. Those are projects that have been authorized at this level and at the Capital Program Review Board level at the state.
Right.
I know, but Pat, you authorize these projects to be done on time and on budget. So when a project is not on time and on budget, before we keep spending more money on them, I apologize if I interrupt. I want to know what's going on and why it is, and I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
If I may?
Jano, let me let the commissioner finish.
No, I don't want you to be frustrated. I'm just trying to understand why, because the way Commissioner Schwartz asked for it, it seems like a simple task. I know that you have to, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's.
Well, let's just break it down. I've got money in the bank to pay invoices that are approved at the project manager level at each of the agencies.
Right, they were approved a while ago.
Okay, and so when those invoices come in and the project manager and everybody else in the agency, according to the agency process, has signed off, and that hits our system, then we are obliged to pay the invoice. Okay, I don't know what invoices are going to be coming in over the next week or month or 2 months. I can make an attempt to work with the agencies to try to identify what's cash flowing now, what's active, what do your project managers expect what invoices do they expect to hit the system? We've asked this question for years, and we've really not gotten good, reliable information because there's not good transparency to the project level up to finance as to what is going to hit the system. We simply don't have really good detailed information on that.
So maybe that's how we fix it, right? Maybe we have to like start weeding things out.
You know, we're a cash flow based issuer, and we're not a project based issuer. So it will fundamentally change the way that we finance the bond finance portion of the capital program.
Will it, or is it just better planning from the agency level?
Gianno, I don't
So
know.
I think these are all totally legitimate questions. First of all, I mean, as somebody who's mostly in the project management business and producing the invoices that Pat's worrying about, I think that what you're hearing from the staff is concern about unintended consequences. That everything that the chair is raising is a totally legitimate topic, and we have to get on top of it. And I don't think that anybody, I can't speak for my colleagues in the agencies, but I don't think that anyone would say, yes, we should have that dialogue exactly as Commissioner Schwartz has said. The question is whether to use the cash flow tools of our finance team as the stick to try to control the particular issues of project management, which, you know, I'm part of. So I've spent a lot of time working with Larry Schwartz on cost containment, and there's nobody who's led more on that. Part of our discussion has also been identifying unintended consequences of things that we've been dictated to do or otherwise. So, you know, my 2 cents, Chair, is if, you know, before you pull the plug or pull the pin on the grenade of the finance tool, what the finance team is saying is, can we have the discussion in a way that will answer your questions, but also have focus on potential unintended consequences of using that tool?
This discussion has highlighted for me the silos that we work in. Pat has to generate money. The project people have to generate projects. The board gets to look at a capital plan once every few years. It's so big that we just get big hunks of money going to one thing or another. The only place where there is a breakdown of the individual projects in the capital plan is at CPOC, and that's an appendix at the end of CPOC where we have a listing of things that are ongoing, things that need money, whether they're on schedule or not on schedule. But these things never come together in one package, and we never get to see it. Larry has raised a question that has bothered me for years. When we do a capital plan, we're told these are the things we need right now. We've got to do this in the next 5 years. 10 years later, it's not done. Obviously, we didn't need to do it in the next 5 years. Some of the things in the capital plan, we are told in advance, this is going to take 3 capital plans before we finish. Some of the things that we're talking about fall into that category, where it takes longer than 1 5-year capital plan. But we need more information about how this all comes together so that we can figure out what we're going to spend our money on, because none of us want more debt. We've all reached that point where we are totally debt adverse. And so you're going to hear this ongoing until we can get everybody in one room and start figuring out how you can connect for us what we're spending the money on and why we need to do it with debt.
So I appreciate your comments, Commissioner. And clearly, the 433 projects that are under construction, a majority of them will exceed the 5-year capital program. Tom, let me ask you a question as General Counsel. Does the Finance Committee have the legal ability to hold this in abeyance and give Bob and others a chance in the next 24 to 48 hours before the board meets on Wednesday, in which I, as chair of the Finance Committee, can bring this forward without us having taken an action today?
Yes.
So in order to not further delay the rest of the agenda, my suggestion is I would ask Pat, Bob, Dave, whomever else, to have a conversation about the request that I made about at least providing the Finance Committee with information on projects that are not on time or not on budget, that before money continues to be spent on those projects, that we get the information, and hopefully you can get answers between now and when the board meets on Wednesday.
Yeah. We've already started gathering that information, and I believe, Commissioner, we gave you that information preliminarily, but we will
Yeah,
provide
you haven't
that.
given me the commitment that you will not spend the money after you borrow it on those projects until we had a discussion as to why these projects are not on time, or why these projects are not on budget, and
Okay.
what you're going to do to get them back on time and on budget.
Okay. What I will give you a commitment is, as Pat McCoy said, we are not selling bonds right away, so we have some time. What I can't tell you I can get in 24 hours or 48 hours is why things are, over budget or beyond schedule. I can tell you that we will try to get all of that information as soon as possible. Hopefully we'll have it all before we go to the next board meeting in July. But, I just can't commit that I could get that in 24 to 48 hours. So,
Are you going to commit that you won't borrow any of the money prior to the next board meeting where there's a further discussion?
I'd have to
Just
check
yes
and
or
see
no.
what, I don't know what our proceeds are. If your intent is to run down the proceeds account to zero without getting into the market before your questions are addressed, then I could say, yeah, we
That's not-
won't.
Listen,
but
Pat, listen to me. Do me a favor. I'm the chairman of this committee. You work for the MTA. I don't appreciate your comment. All my questions are legitimate. And based on the history of this agency, they're being appropriately and properly and responsibly asked. So I'm going to let our new Commissioner Lacewell ask a question, but what I'm going to suggest, because I'm tired of not getting answers to my questions, is saying that we should move on to the rest of the agenda, and we can take this up at the board meeting on Wednesday, and I will have a conversation with Pat Foy, and we'll see where we go with this item. But I think it's really unfair to you, for you to say to me or to anybody else in this board, we're looking to run it down to zero, when I stated right at the very beginning, it is not my intent to be able to fund the capital program. It's my intent for us to know that the money that's being spent is being spent appropriately and wisely, and that we're transparent about it, and that we can answer and defend our decisions and votes when we're being criticized in public. So, Commissioner Lacewell?
Thank you. I am a little confused, and I just would like a clarification, because I thought I heard the CFO to say we do not know why these projects are not on time and not on budget, and that can't possibly be correct.
I said I don't know. We have a list, preparing for this meeting, we had a list of the outstanding projects that were over budget or behind schedule. What I said is, and I said it was a preliminary list, and the chairman said, yes, but you haven't given me the why, which is absolutely correct. I'm saying, I don't have that information. We're going to have to go back to the people who are the project managers who will be able to give us the information. That's what I meant, so if I wasn't clear.
All right. So I'm asking we skip over number one and we go to number two. Does any other member of the Finance Committee have an issue or problem with that? All right, let's go to number two, please.
Next is the MTA and TBTA reimbursement of central business tolling capital costs for federal tax purposes.
Any questions? Motion? Second? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
The third item is transportation revenue anticipation notes.
Any questions? You have a motion? Second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
Next is approval of all agency procurement guidelines. David Ross and Steve Plachaki are here to take questions.
I believe the majority of board members have been briefed on this stuff. Are there any questions? Motion? Second? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
The fifth action item is approval of paid family leave program for non-represented employees. Anita Miller and Allison McGregor are here to take questions.
Any questions on the Finance Committee? Have a motion? Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Lastly, we are asking the board to authorize a payment of $2.7 million to the State Public Work Enforcement Fund. Of that amount, $2.5 million represents the state assessment on the MTA and its constituent agencies for the calendar year 2019, plus a 2018 underpayment of $201,891. The number is calculated at 0.1% of the value of public work construction contracts entered into. Monies are used by New York State to enforce the prevailing wage law.
Any questions? Motion? Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, next we have 4 reports and information items. The first is the annual pension fund report, and Maggie Connor is here to present it. It is also available in the exhibit book and on mta.info.
Do you want to come up here? Oh, okay. I administer our pension plans here, not the state and the city plans, but the MTA-sponsored plan. I know you have the whole briefing in your book, so I'm just going to highlight 2 slides. The first slide is page 4, and it's a very good snapshot of each of our participants, our employees, and what plans they participate. It's also a nice snapshot which encapsulates the assets that are in that plan. Nice, easy one to look at. Sitting next to me is Chris Klavinsky. He's from New England Pension Consultants, and they are the pension consultants for our 3 trusts. The next slide is a slide that Bob Foran and myself are very proud of. It indicates the funding level and how we put money away. We have always fulfilled our actuarially determined contributions. We have never not missed that payment. But Bob, in times that were good, would find excess funds that were around and put a bit into the plans, a nice way to pay off our future debts. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Next are the agency metrics and fair evasion reports, which begin on page 87. Agency reps are here to take any questions. Additionally, Tim Mulligan is here to give a presentation on fair evasion on behalf of New York City Transit.
What I'm going to, I've already talked to Commissioner Feinberg. I'm going to talk to Commissioner Law Metzger too. On the performance metrics, what I'm looking to do is not duplicate efforts here going forward. So I'm going to work it out with them that if they want in their prospective agencies to have you come forward each month to give them a briefing in their committees on the performance metrics, that will suffice. But I would like to keep the fair evasion here with finance, as I think it's appropriate. Okay? So if we can do the fair evasion.
Good afternoon, Pat Warren. I'm the Chief Safety Officer here. Just some highlights about the fair evasion plan in terms of what's new with it. As was announced last week, there are 500 new law enforcement officers that are going to be put against the problem. As of, and we're putting them out in 3 tranches, essentially. The first tranche started this last week. We have about 100 New York City police, additional police, that are doing fair evasion now, as well as 100 MTA police that are on the buses right now. So the New York police are in the subways, and the MTA PD are on the buses right now. We additionally have other forces, our TBTA, our bridge and tunnel officers, peace officers, that are finishing up some training going forward, as well as more officers with the New York City Police that are in training also right now that will be put out over the rest of the summer, such that by the time we get to August, we'll have about 500 additional law enforcement officers out there. Additionally, we have 70 more what we call Eagle Team. These are these are civilian staff, although they have the ability to give summonses that have moved over from doing some of the special bus route work to the regular bus routes in order to also fight fare evasion. So they're out there, and they started today also. So well over 200 folks are out there right now. A couple of other things that we are looking at to help the fare enforcement process one, we are putting out, we've asked that the our wayfinders, these are the folks that help at the stations, and there's about 100 of them out there, that they will be more visible and around the fare arrays to provide a visible deterrent also as people come through those gates. Secondly, we are putting out about 10 monitors. These are TV monitors to go to what Commissioner Feinberg mentioned earlier, the idea of folks being seen on camera, and they will actually be able to see themselves, which acts as a deterrent. If you've been into like a Walmart or whatever and you've seen yourself on camera, you know you're being seen, you're being watched, and that's the idea out there. So that's we'll put 10 out there initially to take a look at how effective that is. We are doing some work on the gates themselves and the fare arrays themselves in order to enhance our ability to not have fare evasion occur at them. And then lastly, we're also putting out some more cameras, and that was talked about also earlier today, CCTV cameras to look at mostly right now for analysis of what fare evasion looks like out there, and then use that analysis to target where we're going to do our control actions. So that's a snapshot of what the program is going to be for the next few months.
The rates are in the book. The update for the first quarter, as you saw, was the fare evasion rate for the bus system was 22.5% for the first quarter. That's January through March, and that is an increase from the fourth quarter of 18 from 21.9%. On the subway side, the rate was 3.9% for the first quarter of 19. That was a 0.5% increase from the fourth quarter of 18. Looking at the last time we met, the quarterly, we wanted to augment those with a monthly number. If you include the April numbers in a year to date, the April numbers, which is a smaller sample, being only 1 month, doesn't change the overall bus rate from the first quarter dramatically. It was lower on the subway side, being 3.53%, so it brings down the year-to-date total on the subway side to 3.7. So that's some evidence of stabilization on the subway side. On the revenue loss, with the fourth quarter, it's a total estimated revenue loss from both subways and buses for 18 of $225 million. With the fourth quarter data, the 12 months ending with the first quarter of 19, that makes it $242 million estimated revenue loss.
So I'm not going to state the obvious. I know that this is a priority for not just New York City Transit, but it's a priority for all agencies to address the fare evasion problem. But we need to make sure that if you need additional resources beyond what you already have and what the governor's helped get you in terms of TBTA officers and stuff like that, you got to tell us in real time. Because the truth of the matter is, as Jason alluded to during the public speaker comment, I didn't really think that the estimated $220 million that we were briefed on in December was really $220 million, and I had my own hunch it was higher than that. So, but whether it's 220, 250, 230, 260, this is a huge number that the agency cannot afford. And it certainly cannot afford to have the rioters think that, hey, that guy's doing it, she's doing it, he's doing it, this one's doing it, therefore why should I do it? So I know you're working hard on this. I know there's an effort underway, but with all the financial stresses and problems that we are facing, we need to really turn the tide much sooner than later. Commissioner Lin.
Understood.
I'm just hearing this as a board member for the first time. I'm concerned that we have state-of-the-art metrics for measuring. I'm wondering how secure you feel these numbers are, and do we have sort of nationally recognized, or the nationally recognized approaches to measuring what fare evasion is, and then national approaches to how to enforce? And are we reinventing the wheel, or have we looked around to see what others are doing and making sure that we're starting at the best possible approach?
Commissioner, I'll take that if I may, having had the benefit of working elsewhere. So the methodology, to answer your first point, it's not an exact science. It's not a metric that's derived from, say, a particular device that counts absolutely who is and isn't paying. It's a sampling methodology, but that's A, been proven to be pretty accurate over time. It's statistically accurate, and B, it is not dissimilar to that technique used by other agencies, certainly places that I've worked. In terms of the mitigation, the types of things that we're doing, we are playing catch up. There's no question about it. In terms of things like CCTV monitors and the various other things that we've been talking about today, the other thing that you won't have heard is the discussion that we've been having in this body and elsewhere around the subway in particular, and the inherent weaknesses of the gate arrays, in that largely due to fire code, you have to have a secondary gate. So in theory, that secondary gate is an emergency gate. It's not supposed to be used for egress. It can be used for ingress. It can be used for people going in, people say with mobility impairment and or with say a stroller. But of course, it tends to be used as a means of getting into the system illegally. So that's not something that we can solve in the short term. You can't lock it shut because it's needed for emergency egress and to maintain fire code because it's included within the calculations. My professional opinion is one thing that will make a real difference, in addition to other things we're doing like Omni, whereby you'll have proof of payment throughout your trip, which is a massive step forward, and we'll have that fairly soon. We have to redesign those gate lines. It is hopeless having a gate that is there for valid reason going in, but which is wholly abused going out. So my team and I are already working on that. We have in procurement some designs for a revised wide gate, which would have feature paddles, so you could still go in, but you couldn't come out unless in an emergency.
Thank you. I certainly would be interested, as we explore these in the future, to see where there have been sort of impact of programs in other places and what the impact has been and why, and to make sure we can use that guidance effectively when we do it here.
Might just answer that. I think back to my time at the Tube, where the so-called Ring of Steel was implemented, and that was gating up every single station with, again, I'm going to say, an inherently better gate design. And almost overnight, I happened to be a station manager at one station in particular, Harrow on the Hill, where the gates were going in, and we'd still see some people try sneaking in. And the day the gates went live and the paddles were powered up, you literally saw people approaching the gate line and saying, oh shit, because they realized now it's time to turn back and go and buy a ticket. So there are ways of tackling this, but again, it's not something I can just click my fingers and fix overnight. So in the meantime, it does require the kind of resource-heavy intervention that we heard Pat describe, namely police officers, obviously properly mandated and making sure we're not targeting a certain demographic, but also use of technology and the other methodologies that we've described. We're all over this issue.
Third item is the contract change order report for the first quarter of 2019, which begins on page 101. Included is the capital contract change order, which is reported in the CPOC committee as well. And David Ross is here to take any questions. The last item is a revised draft of MTA's financial statements for the 12-month period ending December 2018, which is in the exhibit book and at MTA Info. The revised draft will be presented to the Audit Committee on Wednesday, and Naomi Lopez and Pat Cantor are here to take any questions. Okay. Next, we have David Ross with procurements for headquarters.
Thank you, David. For headquarters, there are 7 procurement actions totaling $43,117,300. There's 1 non-competitive action for $884,000 with Crow LLP to perform a review of MTA's capital program development process. This contract will be awarded pursuant to a declaration of critical need required to fulfill a statutory deadline that was established by sections 1279F and 1279E of the New York Public Authorities Law.
Hey, David, can you just answer this question for me?
Sure.
We're going to authorize $884,000 to hire someone to review our capital program development process, yet we're putting out the capital 5-year capital program for 2024 in September. So what is it exactly they're being contracted to do? Because the development process of the 20 to 24 capital program has already basically been completed. So I'm not sure I understand what we're spending this money on. So can you explain it?
Commissioner, I'm Don Spiro, for those of you who don't know me. The item that Dave is talking about is for the forensic audit that's required in the legislation, the budget legislation.
So it's a forensic audit for which 5-year capital program?
It's a forensic audit of the planning process that we go through for our capital program, documenting whether the needs are accurately portrayed, whether the documentation of those needs is correct, whether the estimating that goes into the projects is understandable, et cetera.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion? Second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
So headquarters has 5 competitive actions totaling $40,935,500. The first 2 actions are awards to ETS Contracting Incorporated and Pinnacle Environmental totaling $12.2 million for asbestos abatement, environmental remediation, and disposal services to support New York City Transit and Long Island Railroad needs. The next action proposed is a $7,360,000 award to CB Richard Ellis Incorporated to provide on-call real estate brokerage services. Fourth action is an $18,625,000 award to IMED for all agency vision benefits covering non-represented and some represented employees. The contract will consolidate vision plans that were previously provided through 3 providers under 1 contract. And the last of the competitive actions is a $2.75 million contract with Interface Cable Assemblies and Services Corporation to provide installation services supporting MTA's expansion and full deployment of state-of-the-art time and attendance systems at approximately 1,100 New York City Transit locations. And the last HQ action is a ratification totaling $1,297,800 for Alex Partners to provide project management, business process reviews, and development of core policies and procedures for MTA's time and attendance expansion project.
Any questions? Do I have a motion? Second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
Now to David Keller.
There's 1 action item from Metro North requesting approval to increase the per-ticket subsidy for the Westchester County Department of Public Works and Transportation bus shuttle unit tickets. This action is effective with the sale of the August 2019 Metro North monthly tickets. And Michael Schiffer is here to take any questions.
Any questions? I have a motion. Second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
David Ross will take us through the agency procurements.
Okay, so there are no procurements for Metro North. For Long Island Railroad, there are 2 competitive procurements totaling $42,415,872. First action is an MTA Capital Construction award of a competitively solicited personal service contract with WSP USA for $24,615,872 to provide project management consulting services in administering and overseeing the New York Penn Station Long Island Railroad Train Hall renovation project. The second item modifies an MTA capital construction contract with Skanska USA Civil Northeast, adding $17.8 million to construct a portion of the eastbound reroute approach structure to the Harold Interlock.
Mr. Chairman, these were both discussed and presented at the Long Island Railroad Metro North Committee this morning.
Thank you. Any questions? Motion? Second? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
New York City Transit has two procurement actions totaling $7,480,944. The first is a request to ratify a $7,480,994 modification to a contract awarded to Sistra Engineering for design, procurement, and construction support for a design-build project to install communications-based train control and auxiliary wayside signaling systems on the Queens Boulevard line. The award was issued pursuant to an immediate operating need to support the Fast Forward plan for improving on-time performance and increasing reliability. The last item for New York City Transit is an authorizing resolution to utilize a competitive RFP process to purchase 45 low-floor, 40-foot all-electric buses.
Any questions? Motion? Second? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, there are no items for bridges and tunnels, and there are also no items for FEMTAC. This concludes procurements. Back to David Keller.
MTA consolidated financial and operational reports are on pages 136 to 189, and David Florio will take us through the real estate portion of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I can go through all 13 action items, or if in the interest of time, I'm happy to take questions on an exception basis, if you'd like.
I do have one question. So in the Long Island Railroad, well, the Joint Committee Railroad meetings earlier today, we talked about, or it was mentioned, there is a real estate action item for Riverhead for rent or lease agreement.
Hampton's
Sorry.
Coffee?
Yes, thank you. And it's noted that for the first 3 years, we will not be charging base rents, but in
Correct.
year 4 we'll begin. And then I'm looking at this item that is in this current one for Lawrence Station for Nassau. And we are charging rent, or we're accepting the proposal for rent. But the justification seems to be the same in both situations. So why we are forgiving or not accepting rent for the first 3 years of the Riverhead is because it is determined that there will be value to the railroad for the improvements that will be made by Hampton Coffee. But in this situation for Lawrence, there's also an acknowledgement that there will be value to the railroad for the improvements that they will be making, but they're still paying rent for the first 3 years. So I don't understand why in the Riverhead example, we would not charge rent for the first 3 years while accumulating value from the improvements that they're making, but we are here with the same rationale.
There was an asking rent for each of the stations. In each case, these were the loan proposals we received. For Riverhead, we had tried marketing it 3 times for the past 8 years to no avail. We received no proposals whatsoever. In this particular instance, this is the sole proposer, and these are the terms he offered up, saying that, first of all, it's not an active station building. It's distant from slightly distant from the platform, and it's in an area that has been largely unpopulated by businesses. So to kind of give a leg up, he said, look, I need 3 years of free rent for me to make a go of this to basically cover the amortization of my investment. Given that it was the only valid proposal we've received in years, we decided to accept it. With respect to Lawrence, it's a much more vibrant area. There's a very robust commuter parking population there. The locality has been very anxious for us to find a tenant. It's a higher ridership station as well, so it attracted a much more robust financial proposal.
So I appreciate the incentive, and I certainly understand it's better to have a tenant than not. But to give 3 years worth of free rent as opposed to, let's say, $1,000 a year or any random number, right? Seems to me like a missed opportunity. I think it's still an incentive to pay $100 a month for 12 months at $1,200 than to get nothing. And I just think that it sends a mixed message. Obviously, with a much lower rent, we're still encouraging and incentivizing the interest. But to not take anything, I don't think we're ever in a position to not take rent.
Well, you have to also look in this case, given the low ridership, given that the area has been challenged economically, we view the improvements they were putting into the building, 400,000, as a substantial investment and risk that they're taking. It is their 100% their risk. So again, weighing the two, I put Riverhead as the more challenging of the two, and I view them more as an apple and orange, as opposed to both being apples.
I would agree. One gets like 4 trains a day, the other gets 30 trains a day. Big difference.
And in Riverhead, they'll be relying more on walk-in traffic than in other cases as well. So this was the best we could do. The market spoke in both instances.
I just would not like for this to be a precedent.
Acknowledged.
Moving forward. And there's no action item required. This is an information item for the board, correct?
No, it's an action item.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion? Second? All those in favor?
I will be voting no against this.
On
Lawrence.
the one item?
Correct. On
All the
Lawrence.
other items, you're yes?
Yes.
All right, so please duly note that Commissioner Vanderpool is a no on the Riverhead procurement item. Okay, I think that's it, right? Fun meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn. Second? All those in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.